We're starting to get a little clarity in the top three of this week's NBA draft. We'll talk about that and the teams that might be trading up, trading down, trading out. Lots of trade chatter. And we'll get into a real or fake involving Kyrie Irving and how that impacts the Brooklyn Nets right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Show is available for free everywhere podcasts exist. You can watch the show on YouTube as well and get a glimpse of our wonderful smiling faces. And today, Tony East of the Locked On Pacers podcast joins me, filling in for Jake Madison. I am John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. And we are getting into the draft, which is just tomorrow night, right? Thursday night, draft night. So it snuck up on me, that's for sure. And so what happened is ESPN had a mock draft special with Adrian Wojnarowski there. So he, in his reporting, is giving us, I think, a little bit more clarity. So we'll start off the conversation with this. Tony, you are knee deep in draft coverage. So I know there's been a little bit of fluidity at the top of the draft with the, three names that are there that people have kind of bandied about. Yesterday, they talked about how Banchero might be moving up the board and how the odds changed on him. But in this mock draft on ESPN, they went Jabari Smith to Orlando, Chet Holmgren to OKC Thunder, and the Rockets getting Banchero. What do you make of that top three? You think that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that it makes sense, given, first of all, they had their media availabilities this week, those three guys. Jabari Smith thinks his floor is 2. He only worked out for the Magic and the Thunder. Chet Holmgren, guess what 2 teams he worked out for? The Magic and the Thunder, right? And Banchero did work out for Houston. So just going on that public information alone that those players were willing to share, it sure seems like they kind of know, barring a trade, where they're going to end up on draft night. And that's sort of how it's been tipped the whole time. I think there was some scuttlebutt that Paolo could be headed to Orlando for a workout this weekend, but who knows what actually went down there. There hasn't been much details about that at this time. So it seems like those three guys are going to be the top 3. Basically, every well-connected draft insider has said that at this point. The players said in their own media availabilities that's where they have kind of gone through this process. But the draft surprises us every year. The Celtics, as you know, picked Jaylen Brown out of nowhere. D'Angelo Russell, Jahlil Okafor came out of nowhere. But at this time, at least, given everything that's been said, including by Woj, who knows all, it seems like the top 3 will be Smith, Holmgren, and Banchero in that order. But you never know.
You never do know. You're right. The draft surprises us every time. But really, it's once you get to 4 that things start to get interesting. Now, I know we did our ultimate mock draft, and you, as the pseudo GM of the Indiana Pacers, made a big run from 6 to get up to 4 to get Jaden Ivey. Why is he worth that kind of move?
Makes me feel smarter that real-life GMs apparently are also trying to do what I did in our fictional mock draft exercise. Yeah, Woj talked about this even before a finals game last week, that teams are trying to get up to 4. Jonathan Givony's reported it for ESPN. But every plugged in, Jake Fisher, I think, at Bleacher Report as well, has talked about the Kings potentially moving off of 4, moving back a little bit from 4, because Jaden Ivey seems like the guy that most teams want at 4. But the Kings already have Fox, they already have Davion Mitchell, and they would like to win. Now, they would like veteran ready help. So from a Pacers perspective, a team that, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, maybe looking to move Miles Turner. Definitely sounds like they're looking to move Malcolm Brogdon. They have other vets as well. Could be a natural fit for a trade there. That's why I did it in the ultimate mock draft. The Pacers need that star power that I think Ivy has as a shot creator, and the Kings need veterans. But in general, it sounds like other teams like Washington, like New York, are interested in getting up to 4 because Ivy is seen as that kind of guy, and the Kings are the perfect fit as a move back team, given that they haven't made the playoffs in, my goodness, Jaden Ivey's whole life, basically. So to tie that all together. But they might be looking for like a Keegan Murray type a few picks later or something like that. according to at least all the reporting. So it's just a natural fit that a lot of teams would want to move up, given Ivy's talents and the Kings' needs. And some of those teams can certainly fill that gap. And that's why I made the trade in the Ultimate Mock Draft. But also, it seems like baked in reality, a lot of teams are trying to do similar moves to what I did in that exercise.
There's a great clip. It's from Rafael Barlow that you should go check out, the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, where he discusses this. Should the Kings go with Murray, a better fit, sort of for their team, versus the best player available? And a lot of this comes down to, what are they trying to accomplish right now? This is shaky ground. This is a potential to really, really burn the Kings, because they've done this before. This is, let me throw it to you this way. When you're the Kings, I see the value. I understand you haven't made the playoffs in this kid's entire life, which is just a brutal way to put it. Sorry, Matt.
Not quite accurate, but it's close enough.
It's close enough where it doesn't. Yes, it's pretty accurate. But okay, so you want to make the playoffs. I get it. And I'm not saying like they could actually make the right move here. I'm certainly not well versed enough in this draft to be killing the Kings preemptively, although generally disagreeing with a Kings move is a safe bet. I think that there is some question here. If Ivy ends up being as good as people think he is trading down going to come back and burn the Kings because they wanted to make the 8th seed in 2023 versus doing the right thing and saying, okay, we understand everybody wants to make the playoffs, but if we do this and get the best player, then we wait another year maybe, but it's the best thing long term. I just wonder if the desperation is causing them to make poor decisions.
John, I think it was the Kings who picked Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic on similar terms. I'm joking. I'm being facetious. Obviously, it was the Kings who did that 1 year after picking De'Aaron Fox, who had a very good rookie year. And I don't know no one will ever know the full picture of what went into that decision, but certainly them thinking, hey, we already have De'Aaron Fox, probably didn't make them want to jump all over another ball handler. I bet they regret that decision. So yes, I think there's already precedent even for them doing that. Maybe they do just pick Jaden Ivey because they think he's the best guy. And Keegan Murray or Ben Mathurin or whoever they decide to pick at 4 if they don't pick if they don't pick Jaden Ivey, are good players. Like, it's at least they look like they will be. I'm sure people thought Bagley would be good too. So it's not like they're totally killing themselves with the fit here. But yeah, I think every bad team should take best player available every time. And if you think that's Jaden Ivey and you're Sacramento, you should do it unless you get blown away by a trade offer. So I think precedent from Luka especially suggests that maybe they shouldn't do it. But I get why if they really love a different prospect, maybe it would make sense for them.
Yep. It's going to be an interesting time for the Kings. Honestly, I just hope whatever they do ends up being the right decision. I just want the Kings fans to have some hope. I just want them to have some hope. I don't want them to look at this draft night and be like, oh, again with this. I know it's a different situation, but I don't know. This part of the draft with Sacramento there, Indiana, Portland, New Orleans, Washington down at 10, the Knicks at 11, that swath of draft feels like trade central. Like we might see trades throughout that first round. What's your sense, but without getting too deep into it, because we'll come back at the other side of a break to get deeper into it. But what's your sense in the top 15? How many trades do you think will happen on draft night?
I think we all have a tendency to overestimate that number every year. It seems like, but I will say 2 or 3 because, and this is from most evaluations and people I've talked to, it sure seems like there's a really big tier of similarly ranked players from 5 to whatever, 10, 11, 9, wherever you have it. And so teams, if they feel like they can pick up another asset and move within that tier, will probably do it. And if teams really love a guy in that tier and they don't want another team to pick him, they might try to move up. So there are a lot of natural fits and reasons for swapping to happen in that range.
All right. Hey, one live draft show is not going to be enough for the Locked On Podcast Network. Every show is going live on draft night. So we're talking about the draft right now on draft night on YouTube. Every single team that makes that first round pick, every show is going live 15 minutes after the pick is made. So whatever team makes that pick, if you want to go follow along, check them out 15 minutes after the pick is made. Locked On Rockets, Locked On Kings. You want to see what that reaction is to the number 4 pick or trade, it's all going to be there at on the specific YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. Tony as well. So check that out. Also check out BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. If you want to go bet on who the number 1 pick is going to be, I think the odds might have changed after that mock draft special and Woj dropping some knowledge. I know they talked about the odds shifting a lot for Boncaro in yesterday's show. Maybe those shift back. Who knows what's going to happen? But you can find out at BetOnline. They have all your latest developments, league reviews, news, including the NHL playoffs, the Stanley Cup about to be handed out soon, Major League Baseball, plus events, whatever events out there like MMA, boxing, golf. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite stuff. It's also the best spot for your sports scores, podcasts, even news this season. Head on over to the website. Use your mobile device if you'd like. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. All right, Tony, let's pick up the draft chatter. I'm glad that you're here tonight because a lot of the draft chatter involves your team. Your Indiana Pacers are rumored to be heavily shopping Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, Woj said multiple times that quote, the likelihood is significant that Brogdon gets moved and between now and the draft. So we could be looking at the Pacers as one of those. If they do make if there are 2 or 3 trades, seems likely that the Pacers are going to be one of those teams. So what are the Pacers trying to accomplish if they're moving Malcolm Brogdon?
Yeah, it's a natural decision for them for 2 reasons. Number one, now have Tyrese Halliburton on their team. Tyrese Halliburton is the all-star, the stud that they've been searching for seasons and seasons. He might not be that quite level that I just described, but he was very good for them down the stretch of last season. Like, would have set their franchise record for assists had he played the whole year. He's awesome. And Brogdon and him, they don't play the same position because they can both sort of toggle between both guard spots. But Halliburton requires the ball. And so having it in Brogdon's hands is not conducive to growing your franchise forward if you're the Pacers. That's number one. Number two, Brogdon is much older than the rest of the Pacers core, or the guys that they would like to play a lot of. Duarte, Halliburton, like I already said, Isaiah Jackson, even Miles Turner, he's 3.5 years older than. All the O'Shea Brissett, you can go on and on. He's much older than those guys. So Brogdon is very good. He just doesn't fit those 2 core reasons to be with the Pacers. And then reason 3, separate from the Pacers, he has played 48 games per season since signing a contract with the Pacers. He is injured all the time, very injury prone. That's the reason his value is not higher in these discussions. He's a fringe all-star level talent. When he plays, he just barely ever plays. He only plays a little over half the time, at least in the last 3 seasons. So makes all the sense in the world that a team that is no longer in a position to be really pushing for high seeding or playoff positioning to move on from a guy like that. So it also makes sense that a point guard needy team could say, we love our medical staff. We think we can be the team for Malcolm Brogdon. But it's always scary with those sort of things if you can pull it off. But that's why the Pacers would be willing to move him, and they can get a high pick. I think it's been floated out there that Washington and New York could be 2 teams that potentially want Brogdon. They have picks 10 and 11, or a different team with a worse pick and a nice young player or something. If that's out there, I think it makes sense for the Pacers to pursue it given their team situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you've laid out and that you've been laying out on Locked On Pacers makes sense. I think there will be some competition there for Brogdon. I think a lot of teams, and we'll talk about Kyrie in the next segment, but teams that might be saying, "Oh, hey, Kyrie," I'm like, "Oh, well, we could also go with somebody that's more, I think, or less disruptive." We'll say, and hey, if I'm going to get a guy who's going to play 50 games for me, I might as well get it. I might as well make it Malcolm Brogdon, and he'll be like a good citizen in the locker room, and who knows what. So, yeah, I think the moving of Brogdon on draft night, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. What's New York's goal? What's Washington's goal? What's Charlotte's goal? I think Charlotte is a really interesting team to watch on draft night because they've got picks 13 and 15, and they have Bridges, who is angling for a big contract. And one of the rumors that Brian Windhorst mentioned was that one of those picks could be tagged to Gordon Hayward in an attempt to clear space to get Miles Bridges. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Orlando picking again down there in 13 and 15 because they've got $30 million in cap space, and they could be a very attractive destination for a team like Charlotte to say, here's Hayward, here's 15, and you can take them and whatever, and they'll sign Bridges and give him all his money and pick again in this round. This is an opportunity for a team like Orlando to get a franchise player and other help in the same draft.
100%, and it's a fascinating draft for Charlotte because even last year Charlotte had some higher picks, and they walked out with James Bouknight, and then he only played in 31 games. And they also picked Kai Jones, and he played in 21 games. So they have a crowded team. How is a team like that going to pick 2 times in the top 15? They can't even get their 2 high picks from last year on the floor. So balancing what they're going to do in this draft is fascinating, especially when you bake in, well, they don't have a head coach, which is just crazy to think about at this stage. But they have Hayward out of the game half the time, like we just talked about with Brogdon, and they still can't get these guys on the floor. And I forgot my other point here. Oh, the Bridges money is coming on the books very soon, right? So they need to shovel some salary. They need to figure out who can play and how much. There's no way to me they make both of these picks. So I agree with you. Orlando's a very natural fit. They have a ton of cap space. Grab another lottery pick. Why not? It's only a little bit of years of paying Gordon Hayward. Good vet to have around your young team, I suppose. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. And Charlotte's really interesting because there's just no way. They made 2 picks last year and they could barely play those guys. How are they going to get 2 more rookies in the door? They have to do something. They're a fascinating team to be in this draft.
Yeah, I think they have. Charlotte, as an aside, let's talk about Charlotte for a second. Let's give it sucks for Charlotte because when we finally do talk about them, it's to crap all over the Charlotte Hornets. But the report, Bleacher Report, Jake Fisher, because when Atkinson first backed out, I said, "Ooh, is this some sort of Steve Kerr thing? Is this?"
That's what I thought too.
It seems like the natural kind of, well, he kind of had agreed in principle to a deal, and then all of a sudden they won a championship in Golden State, and you say, oh, you know what? Never mind. You're like, oh, wait, hey, is Kerr going to be like, hey, I've had my fill, and now I'm going to go do some TV and just relax for a while? No, it just turns out that it's more likely that the Charlotte Hornets were going to force him to keep all of those assistants, and they weren't going to pay any new assistants, and he wasn't going to be able to build out his staff. And when you're ready to take this new job, you want to have the autonomy. You want to be able to okay, these are my guys. These are the guys I might want to retain somebody. I just watched Ime Udoka do it. He retained a couple of guys, but then he just went to Portland and just dragged all of his Portland buddies in. And that's how he wanted to build his staff, and it worked. You got to give the guy his opportunity to do what he needs to do. Now all of a sudden, no head coach heading into the draft, which means no guidance in how you want to build your team. If there's a tiebreaker, who should we pick, who should we not pick, then you want the head coach to be like, hey, yeah, I want to coach this guy. This is the type of player I want to build around, or I think he can fit what I'm thinking about doing. You don't have that. You're going to force all of these new guys onto the new coach, who might be Mike D'Antoni, which means forget defense altogether in Charlotte. So just what a wild week it's been for the Charlotte Hornets. And now you're going to pay somebody to take Gordon Hayward so soon after giving him all of that money. It just smacks of, Michael Jordan was arguably the greatest player of all time, but he's quickly going down the road of one of the worst owners of all time because he's just not going to let this team grow or anything. He's just not going to spend any money. He's not going to go into the tax for any real purpose. He's just, I don't know, man. I feel bad for Hornets fans because they watched Kemba walk out the door. Now they've got this mess. It's just a mess. That's my rant.
I can't disagree with you anywhere. And it's funny because MJ's pretty hands off by all accounts. He just doesn't pay up for all the right people all the time. So they have all this nice stuff. They just can't push it far enough because they don't spend enough on everything. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating, but it seems like we can connect these dots pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, which makes you wonder where LaMelo is going to play in like 4 years. but this is like the whole trickle down effect. Like we're talking about teams that could be impactful in trades, and obviously the Pacers are going to be one of those. We talked about the Wizards. New York is going to be super interesting as far as trades go and what they're going to try to do. There might be some competition and who gets to use Orlando's cap space. So that's that. They're going to be in a great position to acquire assets. But it's just watching these teams and then the ripple effect, because at some point, Bridges might get his money or he might not. Maybe he goes. I think he stays, by the way. But how long is LaMelo going to stick around? I mean, if he's around there and it just kind of like keeps cascading, like it's at some point he's going to be. I need to go someplace where there's some stability and I can like shine, like whatever. So there's a lot that could happen with Charlotte. It has a real ripple effect throughout the NBA, just like Kyrie Irving and his departure potentially from Brooklyn has a potential ripple effect throughout the NBA, which we'll talk about next. First, I'm going to talk to you about Built Bar. Built Bar obviously is a favorite of ours. It's a favorite of mine. I'm out and I have to stock back up. And now this mud pie new flavor is out, and that sounds unbelievable. And it's a mud pie in Built Bar and Built Puff. And if you're not sure what the mud pie tastes like, you better sit down if you're a chocolate fan, because it is 100% real chocolate topped with cookies and cream crumble. You got to try it because it's going to sell out fast. It's only here for a limited time. Visit built.com to taste the deliciousness yourself. We've also, if you're not convinced, we've saved the best for last, because Built products are low in calories, high protein, and low sugar. Built's mud pie, 16 grams of protein, 150 calories, 8 grams of sugar. It's just like your mom baked the most deliciously creamy chocolate mud pie, wrapped it up just for you, and they're available at built.com right now, but they are going fast. Again, these are protein bars. We're talking about protein bars, but the way they make these, it's a great, delicious way to get your protein. Low calorie, high protein, low sugar. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off every single time. 15% off every order, every time you go back. Locked15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, every Wednesday we play a little game called Real or Fake. And today's Real or Fake, we're going to center it around the Kyrie Irving drama. But not because we care a whole lot about what Kyrie Irving's going to do. I don't. I know you don't, Tony. But the fact is that if he is going to go, if there is an actual impasse, then this does affect the rest of the NBA. It affects potentially the Lakers if he goes there. And it affects where some of these role players go that, it could change the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference. It could change. It could help propel. So we're going to start with this report. The Real or Fake question is based off a report on heavy.com from Sean Devaney, who says there is fear from the Nets that Kyrie Irving is going to retire if they in the middle of a long-term contract. So they are only offering short-term deals. So my question to you is, real or fake, Tony, Kyrie Irving, if he signs a long-term deal, 5-year deal with the Brooklyn Nets, will retire in the middle of it.
Didn't we get a report about Kyrie retiring early a long time ago? Like when he was with the Cavs or maybe the Celtics?
He's
If it
talked
was,
about it a lot. He's
yeah,
talked about it. He
I
said that
believe
he
he said
kind of
that.
wants to retire in his early 30s.
I was
He's
gonna
30 years
say,
old now.
I think I heard before, but it was a while ago that he doesn't want to play like too far past his prime when he's not as good anymore. That's why that made me go, because I remember him saying and talking about this before. Do I think Kyrie will actually do it? No, he's a competitor. You know, he's got the championship. The Nets are a good situation for him, and maybe he can even make more generational wealth if he does well on another short-term deal. And I don't know, I can't think of a player just retiring in the middle of one of these crazy huge max contracts ever. That said, if anyone's going to do it, it's Kyrie Irving. So I would lean fake, but I honestly, he's one of the guys that is just impossible to read or say. So I lean fake, but I don't have a good grip on that.
So there were rumors last year that that Kyrie might have been on the trading block, that because the Nets were doing fine before the injuries took over, but when they just had KD and James Harden, they were fine. And then guys got hurt and they obviously went into the tank. But when they were doing fine, there were reports that, hey, we don't need Kyrie. Why don't we just trade him now and get some players and support these guys and just make our run with these guys? And the report was that his agent said, hey, if you trade him, he's just going to retire. So between stuff that he said and that threat and everything, I'm going to say it's real. I'm going to say it's real that no matter what, if he signs a 5-year deal, long-term deal with Brooklyn, I don't think he finishes that deal with Brooklyn. First of all, it's no chance, absolutely zero chance. I would bet everything that even if he got everything that he was asking for, a 5-year deal, he would somehow, whether it's retirement or trade or whatever, not finish that contract in Brooklyn. That I can almost guarantee you.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. But retirement, that's completely on the table. Completely on the table that he will. Now, I will bank on this as the caveat or the asterisk. Maybe the asterisk might be the better way. He'll retire and then unretire. He'll retire at 33 and then come back halfway, through the next year, and it'll be like, I'm unretired, and then then there will be a whole like, well, we own your rights, so we're going to trade you and all that stuff. That's going to be the mess.
I have a sincere question about this.
Yes.
Obviously, it would suck if you're the Nets and you were planning to be good and he retired to lose him. But if the Nets kind of know it could happen, I mean, doesn't the salary come off the books if he retires and fills it out in the league? Like, they're not screwed. They just wouldn't have a good player anymore, right?
Well, right.
I remember with Chris Bosh, but the league forced him to retire.
Medical retirement.
Okay, that's the difference. That's what I was about to say. I don't know if it was like a league mandated thing or something.
So it's complicated. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think so. First of all, the medical retirement, yeah, you can come off the books because you have no choice. He can't play anymore. Doctors have determined he can't play,
right?
And that's that. A retirement, if you fill out like certain retirement papers, then you're good. Goodbye. I've waived my rights. And it's you just have said, if you're 2 years into a 5-year deal, you say, all right, I'm retiring. Here's my retirement paperwork. You file it and it's done. Then you, I guess, sacrifice what's remaining on your contract. However, you can just say, I'm retired. It's like Michael Scott in The Office standing there yelling, bankruptcy! Like, he could just yell retirement and he's not officially retired. He says it and then he leaves and he tries to collect the money. Then the Nets would say, well, we're not paying you. You're retired. And there would be some sort of battle and then it would get really, really messy. So that's the thing.
That makes sense. That would be concerning. Yes.
I would love it if players had to declare their retirement in the Michael Scott fashion. That would be hilarious.
And then someone like Oscar, like a different player on the roster, has to explain that that's not how it works. You can't just say it.
Right. Like Patty Mills comes over and goes, no. Sorry, mate. So I promised that we would talk about this in the greater context. Bruce Brown is a free agent, and that's a key player for them. And like they have limited resources. It seems like Patty Mills does he opt in? I haven't actually. It wasn't him that opted in. Sorry, but he can opt in or he can opt out, and that $6.1 million that he's owed is right around taxpayer mid-level money. So he can opt out of that and just. I'm sure there's a team out there that'll say, "Yeah, we'll give you the taxpayer mid-level, Patty Mills. Like we'll have you or some portion of that." I don't think he has to worry about that necessarily. So he could go. Bruce Brown is looking for a raise. He could go. But if Kyrie's going to stick around and they say, hey, we're committed to this, KD, Kyrie, then those guys will stick around. Those are two key players for them on their roster. If they sit there and say, hey, I'm out, the Nets don't have a whole lot of options. They do have their own taxpayer mid-level that they could use, but then that's it. You can replace one guy, but you can't replace the other. They're going to be stuck. And I don't know that ring chasers are going to sit there and say, Brooklyn's my choice, because Kyrie, we don't know with Kyrie. Boston just went to the finals. We can go to Boston. They've got spots. They need help. Miami is always a great place for a ring chaser to go. Milwaukee with Giannis is a great place to hook on because you always have a shot. There are other options now. Brooklyn's not the only game in town. Like, this has repercussions for other teams. Like, I'm looking from a Boston perspective. Bruce Brown's the type of guy that they need. If he's like, hey, I'm done, and he's from the Boston area, come on home to Boston. And if he says, I'm done with this drama, I'm going to a competitor, that's a big hit because Kyrie is doing all of this stuff. That has repercussions.
100%. It totally matters. And the Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons Nets, even without Kyrie, could be good. We also haven't seen Ben Simmons play in a year, so who knows? And if they lose some of those other key vets and they can only replace one of them, like you perfectly described with their mid-level exception, they could be a much worse team very quickly. Like, that is not only having a ripple effect on their current team, going from the big three of Kyrie, Harden, and Durant to very quickly one of three. They would also have those ripple effects, and then Durant's maybe like, hey, I don't like this. And then all of a sudden they're back to not being the Nets anymore. So, yeah, this could all change very quickly for Brooklyn. What happens with Kyrie will be potentially the catalyst for quite a bit of that.
It'd be very interesting to see how he handles this. He's in the Kyrie conversation is always such a wild one because on the basketball court, there's like three compartments to this. On the basketball court, he can be awesome. When he's fully engaged, he's just thrilling offensively on the court. There's all of the off-court stuff that we've talked about, just whatever. He just decides to not show up for a while. But then on the other side, there's the off-court charity stuff, the social consciousness stuff that he's tremendous at and has done amazingly impactful things. There's a Kyrie Irving conversation that you say, wow, this dude is like, I think his heart is generally in the right place when it comes to this other stuff, and people will bring it up, and rightly so. Like, he does a lot of great stuff, but man, he really makes it hard on himself because he does all this other stuff that puts himself ahead of so many of his teammates.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens with Kyrie, and we'll see what happens with the NBA draft. You know, remember that the NBA, we have our ultimate NBA mock draft. First picks have been made. You can search now for the ultimate NBA mock draft. Get over 50 insiders, Odyssey sports experts, draft experts from the Locked On NBA Big Board. The 5-episode ultimate NBA mock draft is now underway. Make ultimate NBA mock draft your second listen today. You can make your first listen Locked On NBA. You could also make one of your listens Locked On Pacers with Tony East. Thank you, Tony, for hopping on and filling in on a Tuesday/Wednesday show. And I'm John Karalis of Locked On Celtics. Follow me on Twitter at John_Karalis. Let us know what you think. Subscribe if you aren't subscribed. Catch the show on YouTube. Watch the show there. Subscribe, like, comment, all of that good stuff. Share the podcast. Tell your friends. Tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On NBA podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.